Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Good Word Podcast. I'm Brett Knight, and I just want you to know that you are in for a treat today. I'm joined here on the podcast with my good friend and Courtney Riddle, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Courtney's life now and her testimony of how God has brought her through things and in order to get her here today. But Courtney, I'm so glad that you're here.
I'm so glad I'm here as well.
Now, you and I, we met several years ago when you were waitressing at the Garden Cafe. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
And I remember that. The Garden Cafe is a local restaurant in the Rickman community, and I'm there quite often. As a matter of fact, I have breakfast there with the same group of guys, and I've been going there for probably most every Tuesday through Friday for about the last, I don't know, maybe 10, maybe a little more than that, years.
Right.
And so it's a local establishment that's kind of one of the hubs of our community. And you began waitressing there. How old were you when you began there?
I had just turned 16.
Okay. And so 16, so that's like one of your first jobs.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it was my first job.
It was?
Yes, it was.
You couldn't tell. You were really good at being
a
waitress.
It. I loved just helping people and getting to form relationships.
Right.
Just like with you and your wife. And
absolutely. You know, we came in there a lot. My wife Donna and I would go in there in the evenings and in the afternoons, and we came in there quite often, and we got to know most of you all. Some of them that working in the back, but mainly you ladies who were up front.
Yes.
You were serving, and so we got a chance to talk with you. And sometimes it would get slow enough in there that we could have conversations with you about what was going on in your life, what boys were in your lives, and what was going on with your jobs, and what was going on at school, and right. Where you were planning on going to school after high school. And I remember we got to know you a lot more, especially as you progressed through high school. And I specifically remember your senior year because you worked a lot. You were there working a lot,
yes.
and we had often, Donna and I, we raised 5 kids, so we're kind of the parent mode all the time. So we're like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go to school at?
Yes.
What's your thought? And I'm sure everybody was always asking you that.
Yes, for sure.
And you're kind of a bright star in the room anyway. You've always got a big smile. You've always got a cheerful expression on your face, and you always people kind of gravitate towards you because of that. And so I remember those times, and we were really anxious to see kind of what life had in store for you,
yes.
And kind of watching from that. And but sometimes life isn't always what it looks like on the outside, is it?
Right. No, it's not.
And so tell me a little bit about, because I know about that time in your life after you graduated, maybe even before, but in that time in your life as a young woman, that your life began to change quite a bit. Tell me a little bit about what was going on.
Yes, it did. I was very focused on trying to paint a pretty picture for the outside. I still had a lot of issues from like unhealed relationships and things like that. And I just tried not to let them get involved with my life that I showed everybody else. And so I struggled with that and just deciding on what my future really looked like and everything. So
a lot of what we were seeing on the outside was really the mask that you were portraying to us. I mean, and we all do that. It's hard to let everybody into the real us sometimes.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Because you end up making yourself vulnerable, and you make yourself, so it's easier sometimes to put up those masks. And I think we've all done that at times. And as you continue to have that mask up, you continue to struggle with other things going on in your life.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what were the struggles like? I mean, the pressure is really on a young person when they're about to graduate. You feel like every decision you make is a life or death decision.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And that I've got one shot to make the right decision, and right. Everybody puts pressure, and even people who are well-intentioned, like Donna and I would always ask you, so where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And that puts pressure on people, and eventually sometimes that pressure builds up and begins to explode a little bit, doesn't it?
Right. Yes, it does. And for me, like in high school, and I would even say late middle school, I struggled with relationships and like boyfriends and things like that, because I always cared about like worldly views and how that would fill the void. And it really was destructive as I got older.
So the relationships you were forming had a lot more to do with how everybody saw you.
Yes.
Not necessarily
yes.
feeling the needs of you being around people that thought of you and thought well of you and wanted the best for you.
Right. It was all based upon like worldly views, like, am I popular, or is this going to be the right choice? Will people like me because of this choice that I'm going to make, or is it going to cause me to have more friends and things like that?
Absolutely. And that doesn't always lead to a good end, does it?
No, it does not.
Tell me a little bit about where that led in your life.
In my life, I definitely, because of the void that I had that only Jesus can fill, I was not filling that void with Jesus. So it led me down the destructive path of using drugs and alcohol. Like, I would go to football games in high school and I would be drinking or things like that and not leading a good example because I always cared about what other people thought of me, and it just led into a rough path.
There is an enormous amount of pressure. I don't think we can overestimate, especially with teenagers and young adults, the pressure of your peers around you and wanting to fit in and be popular.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And that leads oftentimes to you're at a party environment or other people are drinking or other people are using drugs, and the pressure gets to be put on you to, hey, fit in.
Yes, and that's what happened with me. I noticed the people around me. I got into a different crowd of friends that I had originally, and around me they were doing things like prescription pain medication and things like that, and I was never raised around that. And but to me, for somebody who didn't really know, it looked like they were having fun, or it was just something to do like on the weekends or things like that. And I did that not knowing that it would cost me a lot out of my future.
At what point, how early do you remember using drugs and alcohol?
I honestly, I remember, I was about 12 whenever I would steal my mom's wine out of her fridge, and it would actually help me sleep because I had issues with sleeping, as a child. And that definitely is not what 12-year-olds should do.
Right.
And by the time I was 17, that's whenever I first used the first prescription pain pill.
So at 17 years old.
Yes.
And how quickly did that escalate into worse things?
That took about 6 months or so, but within a week, I knew I was addicted. I didn't know what that even looked like, but I knew that I couldn't function without it.
And for people who are listening to this podcast, whether they be parents with teenage people in their home,
yes.
women or young women or young men, or maybe with a teenager who's might be listening to this podcast, what you're saying is, I think it will shock people.
Yes.
That within a very short period of time.
Very short.
You began using prescription medication.
Yes.
And you were abusing medication. Yes. You obviously weren't prescribed it.
No, I was not.
And you were using this prescription medication, and you got to a point very quickly where you couldn't function without it.
Yes, and I would even, it started out that I would get headaches. It was very like a medical issue whenever I didn't have it. And that's how it started out. And then I soon fell into the light, that you can function better with this. You do everything better like this, but you don't. And that's the reality of it, because that's not really you, because that's just a fake shell of who you are. And the real you is so much better. Even if you struggle with things like anxiety and things like that, I continuously give that to the Lord, and He's helped me.
And I think both of us being Christians, that we recognize that this drug use and this, these masks they're our enemy's way of getting us further and further from relying on Christ.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And it's the counterfeit, right?
It is.
You say, I can't function without the drugs.
Yes.
It's the counterfeit to what we were meant to function with.
Yes, you're exactly right. And before I found out, I had been addicted to those drugs for almost a year, and I realized how I was living almost in a fake world. And then in addiction, you begin to detach from people and isolate yourself. I wasn't ready to face the fact that I needed help. And you also can't have relationships because you lose the emotional value of people. And that's definitely not what Christ intends us to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. When did your drug use begin to manifest in even more serious ways?
I started college at Ball State right after high school, still struggling with this issue, and I bought into the lie. Oh, I'm working full time at this time. I was a manager at Suntan City, all during this addiction, and I even got like a manager within a short time. And I was thinking, oh well, everything's going really good, and I'm in school full time, so I was having all these excuses, but still very far away from my family and friends and things like that. And I had actually overdosed for the first time last March. And I found out very quickly, Courtney, you can't operate like this anymore. That's not you. And if you continue acting like it is you, then it's not going to end well at all.
And what happened? I mean, how did, I mean, and I don't want to pry into it, but I think there's some of us that don't understand, or we need to understand what was going through your mind when you overdosed the first time.
Yes. I actually was thinking that I had nothing really to live for. I almost wouldn't say that I was suicidal, but it come to the point that I was no longer just living just to be alive or the way that God intended me to. I was just totally dependent on using the drugs, and that it had taken over my life. So I had fell in love with the drugs so much that it was all that I had cared about. So for me, the fact of being alive meant less than actually being high. So it definitely turned my life around.
It became the center of your life.
Yes, it did. It took everything. It stole everything from me.
You detached yourselves from relationships with your peers, with other friends, and with relationships. It detached you from your family.
It did.
It detached you from being focused on a future.
Yes, it definitely did. It took all my hope for a future without them. It definitely did.
It numbed your soul.
Yes.
And it numbed your soul and distanced you from your family, from your friends, from Christ, from the community.
Yes.
And I think that's something that those of us who work around people who are struggling with addiction, that we often see, is that they begin to isolate.
Yes,
they
do,
pull
because their
away.
life is a huge secret. Yeah. And if you act like you have, like for me, I was working full time, I was going to school, so I would have all these excuses as to why I don't need help. So I would say the first overdose was almost like my family had come to the hospital here in Cookeville, and they realized how big of an issue it was. And I didn't know what to do after that. It was like a big unveiling happened.
All of a sudden, your mask fell off in front of everybody.
Yes, it did. It did.
And you couldn't ignore it anymore.
Right. It was just there, out in the open. And so I had one of two choices. And I'll never forget whenever the doctor had told me, you know, sometimes church works for people. And at that time, I didn't want to hear anything about God. I was very upset with him. I thought he was mad at me. I didn't think that he would want to hear from somebody like me who does drugs or who has issues with boys or doesn't make the best decisions all the time. And I'll never forget whenever the doctor had said sometimes church works. And I was thinking, well, what does Jesus want to do with me whenever I'm sitting here acting like this? And it's just totally not the case. Jesus is the only thing that saved me. He's the only answer.
And I think you and I sitting here, of course, we have a different perspective sitting here, right? And we recognize what a lie that is.
Yes.
That whole time, Jesus wanted nothing more but to be with you.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And he wanted nothing more but to take those burdens from you.
Yes.
But that's the lie that we're told.
Yes, you're exactly right.
And addiction helps make that lie believable.
Yes, it makes it very believable, because I got to a point using drugs that I wouldn't look in the mirror anymore. And I think that has
literally, you wouldn't look in the mirror.
I wouldn't. I would, because I didn't want to see who I had become. Because I knew I had a grandmother. She prayed for me as a child and other family members as well. And you begin to buy into the lie because you can see it. It's right in front of you that you're not good enough, that why would any sane person be making the decisions that you are? But in all reality, you're giving Satan your mind to kind of live through you whenever you allow yourself to be in addiction like that without coming to Christ.
What broke the ice in you where you eventually said, I got to do something different?
Oh, yes. So this was afterwards. After the first overdose, I had moved to Chattanooga. I sought out help for a 28-day program. I ended up leaving and continued down the destructive path. So at this time, I was in a different location. I still only wanted one thing, and that was drugs. So I had overdosed again. By this time, this furthered on into the full use of fentanyl pills. I did that a lot in my addiction, and I went to a hospital in Chattanooga. My mother drove almost, I think it's 2 hours, and she sat beside me in the hospital bed, and she said, and I overheard the doctor and her speaking, and the doctor had asked her, is this the first time? And she said, no. And the doctor said, okay, I'll be back and I'm going to bring Narcan, and she has to have it, 2 refillable bottles everywhere she's at. If she's at your house, you have to have some in your bathroom, in the drawers. She has to have it in a car with her at all times. It was something that I didn't even know. I didn't know what that was. And realizing that my mom is being told that her daughter can't go within 2 feet of anywhere without Narcan beside her, with what I was doing, it was a wake-up call. I was unconscious, but I could overhear that conversation. And I'll say that the use of drugs and the addiction did not, I didn't get delivered from it until I asked Jesus to deliver me.
Amen.
For sure.
Amen.
But that was the breaking point when I was like, okay, I'm done.
There's a couple things you said there that I think people listening to this are going to react to. And one is when you said, I began using fentanyl pills.
I did.
And we all know how scary fentanyl is.
It is very scary. It's terrifying.
How dangerous it is. And yet the drugs had you such a state of mind that you were willing to take this poison.
Yes.
And put it into your body willingly. Right. Because that's the state, that's the desperation that you had gotten to.
Yes, it is. And I'll tell you, and I'm ashamed of it, but I know that the Lord has forgiven me. And once the Lord heals you, you're willing to tell anybody.
Absolutely. You almost have to.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's almost his calling on you, because if he can do it for you, he can do it for anyone else. When I hit my lowest point and I was using fentanyl full time, it was because I couldn't afford what I had started with. And that is very similar to other people's stories and in their history. And with doing that, I had lost all hope. That was whenever I hit my breaking point of ever stopping, because I learned that, oh, well, I'm a drug addict. I fit all these boxes. So I'm just going to be another statistic, because whenever you get on those kind of opioids, then it's a very low statistic to be able to never do them again, or to actually walk away free of addiction. So at 18 years old, I bought into the lie that I'm always going to be a drug addict, because at a lot of rehab facilities, they teach you that once an addict, always an addict. Well, Jesus doesn't say that.
That's right.
He doesn't call you that. So I've been called a drug addict, and still to this day that does happen, but you have to know that you are a child of God. Absolutely. And that's not what he calls you, and that's not your name.
That's exactly right. He gives you a new name, doesn't he?
Yes, he sure does.
Gives you a new name.
Yes.
And with that new name comes new authority.
Yes.
And authority to resist.
Yes.
And authority to become
right.
triumphant.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the answer. That's the answer. The other thing that you said that I think it hits hard for all of us is the doctor essentially said because of what she's using, the fentanyl, she's going to continue to have overdose after overdose after overdose,
and that's what happens.
And so much so that you just got to keep medicine around everywhere, Narcan, that would bring you back to life after you essentially die from overdoses.
Yes.
That's what Narcan is, right?
Yes, it is.
It brings you back from overdoses.
Yes. It does.
And for anybody who doesn't know what Narcan is, that's what it is.
Yes.
So essentially he was saying based upon what you were doing in your lifestyle, you were going to continue to have overdoses.
Yes.
And that you were going to continue to essentially have to be revived by Narcan.
Right. You're exactly right.
And that's just going to be your life.
Yeah.
18 years old.
Yes, that's exactly. I left the hospital, and it was I don't have a lot of memory of that time, but I think the Lord has allowed me to know that, and that conversation that way, somebody else that's struggling or in those same shoes, that's not who God calls you to be. I had dreams of being a nurse, in high school, even middle school, of being in the medical field. And as I sat on that hospital bed, I was just thinking, well, how is my life like this when I'm supposed to be on the other side? I'm supposed to be in school, pursuing my dream.
You're supposed to be on the other side of the bed.
Yes.
I talk often that sometimes God moves mountains. It says so in the Bible that we have enough faith, he'll move a mountain. Yeah. But then sometimes he gives us the strength to climb them so that we can put our banner on top of that mountain for other people to see that it's possible to climb that mountain.
Yes.
And to know the path to take to get there.
You're exactly.
And that's what I see when I see you. I see somebody who had to climb a mountain so that she could put a flag on top of that mountain so that other young women at that same situation could see that flag and say, yes, not only can I, but that's how I do it.
Yes.
How did you begin to turn it around?
I had went home after that hospital visit. My mom stayed with me, and immediately I told her, I said, this is not my life. I can't live like this anymore. So I know it was the Lord that gave me that window of hope, that wake-up call, if you want to call it something. And immediately we started looking, and I was very scared. I would say that I was wrapped in fear. And my family members started looking at like long-term programs. And I did not want to come back home or anything like that because that made me nervous. But they found Adult and Teen Challenge, and within, I did a over the phone call as an interview, and they let me come within 5 days. So that's whenever the door opened, and that's whenever I actually gave my life to the Lord again.
I think it's so important at this point to pause for a second and talk about exactly what you just said, because I think it's a fundamental truth of overcoming and gaining victory. The Lord opened the door.
Yes, he did.
Who had to step through it?
I did.
You had to step through it. And I think sometimes we miss that point. We think the Lord's going to open the door and drag us through it.
Yeah.
But we have to take a step. Yes, now the Lord will open up the doors, and he'll close doors that we don't need to go through.
Oh, for sure.
We ask him, for that guidance. But when the door gets open, you have to step through, and you did.
Yes.
You heard that, and you did that. Now tell me, you were at Teen Challenge, Adult and Teen Challenge for a year.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
A little over a year.
How was that?
I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
What a testimony.
Most people look at me crazy when I say that, and I'm not saying it was just a walk in the park, but that's whenever I knew who Jesus was. I was raised in Cookeville, around this area, and I grew up going to church, but I never had I didn't know Jesus wanted a relationship with me the way he really does. And I didn't know what deliverance was either. And that's exactly what I needed. So anybody in addiction, or whether it's any type of addiction or any sin, because that's what it is. That's what addiction is. It's living in sin. And whenever you give your life like that, that's what happens in any form. So I needed deliverance. And whenever I asked the Lord, he freed me from addiction. And I mean, it's still, I wouldn't say I struggle now, but there's always new things that come up, and you just have to give that to the Lord.
I just have to hang on to the table here as we're talking to not jump up and down while you're saying that. We're trying to be all dignified here on this podcast and talk about this, but hallelujah, praise God.
Yes.
Because deliverance is the key.
It is.
It's not.
And you have to want it. You have to say, Lord, because I went to Teen Challenge in the chapel, and I can tell you the seat that I sat in, really, I was kneeling down, and I said, Lord, I don't want my life, and I really gave my life to drugs. and to a lot of different things that don't matter now. So, Lord, if you want my life, because clearly you can do something with it. Because I'll tell you, I don't know if I believed in God when I went to Teen Challenge, but when I told the Lord, if you want my life, here it is, because I'm done with it. And I meant that with everything I said. And he's shown me, even over a year later, here I am, that when you give your life to the Lord, that he does not show up empty-handed at all.
No, he does not.
He never does.
I'm a very visual person. You were at a church service last night where I was speaking, and I shared that oftentimes I'll close my eyes and see things visually. It's just how matter of fact, sometimes it's how I recall things, is to close my eyes and picture the page that I read it on. And
right.
And it doesn't always work that well, but it does. And so as you're saying that, I'm just picturing the reality of it. When you say, Lord, here's my life.
Yeah.
Come get it.
Right.
He runs.
Yes.
And he tackles
You're exactly
you.
Right.
He doesn't
You're
stand
right.
back and say, let me ponder it.
Yeah.
He runs and he tackles you.
Yes.
And he says, I have been waiting for that moment.
Yes. Yes.
And tell me, Courtney, tell me what your life's like after that.
Yeah. After that, I'll never forget, I was still in Teen Challenge at this time because I spent a lot of time there. And the Lord showed me, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but when you're singing worship songs, all of a sudden, when you've sang them all your life without much meaning, but when you sing the first worship song and God really just shows you who he is, that all the songs that you sing and all the praises, they really are to him. And you just get that. I mean, it is the Holy Spirit, and he just opens up your heart. And I'll tell you, when I got saved, when I would look outside before I was saved, everything just seemed very dim. And I think that has a lot to do with addiction and living in sin and just being deceived by the enemy. And that was my life. And when I was saved, I'll tell you, I would even look outside and the shade of green, like on the trees and things like that, would even be brighter. So the Lord had showed me, you've been living this way, but I'm about to give you so much more. And just like that abundant life that Jesus talks about.
Absolutely. That abundant, vivid life.
Yes.
That
yes.
Vivid. I mean, literally.
Yes, because your eyes become open. My eyes were not open at all. And he has just never let me down. Now, he helps me work on patience. For sure, still to this day.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too. I'm 51. How old are you now, Courtney? How old are you?
I'm 20 now.
You're 20.
Yes.
So there's 31 years between us.
Yep.
And we're both still working on patience.
Yes. Yeah.
and the Lord is showing that patience with me by continuing to be patient with me.
Yes.
While I work on patience.
Yes, exactly. You're exactly right. And now throughout Teen Challenge, whenever you get sisters, that's what they call them, you get to show them around the program and like the do's and don'ts and what we're able to do. And I was shown just what a family looks like. I have a wonderful family, but now that I know the dynamic of that, I can be a good sister, I can be a good daughter and things like that. So,
let me ask you a couple questions. Delivered?
Yes.
Saved?
Yes.
Redeemed?
I am.
Made whole?
I am.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
Drug addict?
No.
No,
not
you're
anymore.
Not.
That's
no,
not what
you
I'm
are
called.
Not. That is not what you were called.
Exactly.
He gave you a new name and a new purpose.
Yes, he has.
You say you learned what family was.
Yes.
You helped to restore your family.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
your family has changed.
Yes, the Lord has definitely just done it. I'm blown away. I mean, my sister, and don't get me wrong, she has been a Christian the whole time I was living the life I shouldn't have been living. But whenever you see, she would want to come to church services while I was in Teen Challenge, and she was actually, her and her husband was able to find a home church while I was in Teen Challenge because the Lord opened that door for them as well. And God is a God, he's a restorer, and that's a promise to all of us in his word, to each and every one of us, whatever that may be. He restores things, and he's restored so much while I've been gone that I don't have to be there. I mean, he's restored a lot.
The Bible tells us that he'll restore what the locust has eaten.
Yes.
He'll restore it to us.
Yes, that is a promise that we hold on to.
Absolutely. tell me the rest of the story. I was there when you graduated Teen Challenge.
Yeah.
I came to your graduation, was able to sit there in chapel saw you. And I hadn't seen you in a little while.
Right.
You know, it'd been a little while. Obviously, you were in Teen Challenge for a year.
Yes.
And Donna was sitting next to me, and she said, I have never seen her more beautiful, more confident, more glowing. You were just absolutely glowing. Yes. The Lord's favor just shone on you.
Yes, yeah.
And it seemed to me like the Lord was just laying the world out before you.
Yeah, he definitely did. And I was just so excited. I had no idea what it looked like. And now I've been graduated. I graduated in May, so a few months now. And he's just opened door after door. And I've asked him whenever I was really close to graduating, okay, Lord, what's next? Because I know my first calling was, okay, you stay at Teen Challenge, because I felt the peace of God when I was there. And it's terrifying when you leave that, but just like the scripture says, wherever we go, he is with us. So he was able to demonstrate that to me in a totally different way, because it's almost scary whenever you get to that point and you're ready to leave the place that introduced you to Jesus.
Absolutely. I'm very active in the recovery community here,
yes.
and
yes,
I work with a lot of people, and I always pray hard when people are graduating programs, because
that's very important.
It's difficult when you leave what I call the bubble.
Right.
When you leave the recovery bubble, where you've been surrounded by people, people in different phases of recovery, but the purpose is all the same.
Right.
And then you go out into the world where there's all these competing values, competing purposes.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden it's like, I'm not surrounded by people who know Jesus.
It's different.
It's different. And so you have to learn to survive out in that.
Yes.
And so I always pray real hard for the men and women who've left recovery, who've graduated recovery,
right.
and to make sure that, that they're finding the right spot. And I work real hard, for example, with housing for some people coming out, so they have safe, sober housing.
Yes.
Because of that. Now you had family.
Yes,
that luckily, fortunately, and
yes, I have.
So tell me what happened here just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, I remember while I was at Teen Challenge that I looked over at Miss Rachel. She was a staff member there, and I said, I want to do the pageant. I said, I want to do the fair pageant. And that's something, like you mentioned, confidence at my graduation. That's one thing I struggled with before I was saved, and I was putting my value in things that I thought would bring me confidence. But confidence is in the Lord. It's only from the Lord, or it's fake, and it doesn't work. So I was able to do the Overton County Fair pageant, and I was really excited because I was almost too old for it. But I said, Lord, this is just something that I want to do for fun, because I've never been able to do it before, because I lacked that confidence. And now that he's restored that to me, I just wanted to get out of my comfort zone. I've never even attended a pageant before. So I did a lot of research, and so many people in Overton County had helped me and made sure I was prepared and things like that. And I prayed. I said, Lord, if this is a door that I'm supposed to walk through, then you will open it, and you'll keep it open just for me. And he has. And what I look back and I think is, who would have thought, like, a beauty pageant, yes, they do get you involved in the community and help you create awesome friendships, but only the Lord could have correlate me being able to go to churches and share what he's done in my life and a beauty pageant. So I'm thinking it's only God. So that's almost verification and confirmation that he's done that.
So for maybe people who are listening who have been living under a rock in our county, or maybe from other counties, so you went to the fair.
Yes.
And you were in the pageant.
Yes.
And you came away with?
The fairest of the fair.
Right. You came away with the big crown.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. It was so fun.
And I think so many people rejoiced when that happened.
I think I felt it, and I don't know how that happened, but I know that I felt like almost everybody was just praying for me, and it was really neat just to see because I was home, recently, but I moved away, so I got to see a lot of people I went to school with and things like that. So it was really neat to just see that and get to talk with them about what the Lord has done in my life, and if they can do that, and if He can do that in my life, then whatever they're going through, then
the Lord is no
be-
respecter of persons.
Yes,
right?
Exactly right.
He didn't do for you what he's done for you.
Yes.
The miracles that he's done for you because
Right.
you're Courtney.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
He would have done it if you would have been Amy.
Yes,
Or
you're
Jill.
exactly right.
Or John. Or Scott. He
Right.
would have done it for you.
Anybody.
And so I think for a lot of us, when we saw that crown being placed on your head there in front of the whole community,
Right.
What came to my mind was, that's our God.
Yes, you're exactly right.
He will rebuild you right in front of everybody.
Yes.
For
Because I
everybody to
fell
see.
very, very far in Overton County, in this area. I did not leave a good example. And so I think it's a picture of God's forgiveness, like you said, and saying, look, this is what I can do whenever you let me.
Exactly.
Because it's all about us giving it to him and letting him work.
So the Lord opened up another door for you.
Yes.
And what did you do?
I've been busy recently just being able to share with others of what he's done in my life.
Been to many churches.
Yes, yeah.
Got to give your testimony in front of many groups of people.
Yes, a couple of times. And I am very excited because I just keep adding to the list the different churches on Sundays. And I'm just thinking, Lord, this doesn't even seem like it's me, because it's not. But the Lord has given me this because he trusts me with it, because he knows that somebody out there is struggling and they need to know, like I did, that they're not just another percentage that didn't make it, because that's not how the Lord views you.
So that leads me to my last question before we wrap up here. If there's somebody out there listening who's a parent, a friend, a family member, husband, a wife of somebody who's in addiction, or maybe somebody who's in addiction themselves right now.
Right.
What do you got to say to them?
I'll say the number one thing that I needed to face was my fear. And you can't do that alone. But I remember making the decision to go to Teen Challenge, and Satan was filling my mind with all of these lies about how that it's never going to work, that this is you now and you can never change. But only you get to make that decision. And God has given you the free will to make that decision, to be able to want something better. You have to want to do this, and you will never regret it whenever you make that decision. It won't be easy, and it's not always going to just be an open door necessarily, but you have to want your life back, because this is not who you are. This is not who God created you to be. But you can become that, because that's why you're here.
Amen. Amen. I think it's only going to be when we're in the kingdom that you're going to know how many people have heard your story and have moved towards Christ because of it. Yes. And I think that's an awesome thing. That's an amazing thing. I can't wait to see what happens with you next.
Yes,
I can't wait to see the exciting things that are going to happen with you next. And we'll be, of course, following along and keeping up with you and there to support you and to be with you. And I think I just want to tell you how proud I am of you.
Thank you.
How proud I am of you. And thank you for joining me on here. Thank you for telling your story.
Awesome.
Thank you for being so obedient and willing to go share your story with others. Because I know it's not easy.
Right.
You know, you wore that mask for so many years in your teenage years because you didn't want people seeing that. But and now you're willingly showing it.
Yes, because when the Lord heals you, he heals you completely with nothing left. And so it's for the next person now.
Absolutely.